Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Brian Dainsberg Podcast. A new year, new season of the Brian Dainsberg Podcast, Christian Living in a Complicated World. I'm your host, Brian Dainsberg, lead pastor of Alliance Bible Church. And we are kicking off with the subject of sports. Good, bad, or something else? Since football season's upon us, I thought it'd be appropriate to do a few reflections on sports. Now, granted, this won't be interesting to everybody, and I am biased in favor of sports, so take that for what it's worth, but try to give a way to watch sports maybe that you haven't considered before. 76% of American men watch football regularly. That's a lot. The most watched television event in the history of the U.S. was the Apollo 11 moon landing. But numbers 2 through 9 on the top 10 list are various Super Bowls. So we are as interested in football as we are in the very first moon landing. Now that's Americans. Sports are a pervasive part of world culture, not just American culture. Several years ago, I co-led a men's mission trip to Peru. Our group was staying in a very populated area of Lima. And that night, the Peruvian soccer team was playing an Olympic qualifying match against Paraguay, a team they hadn't beaten in 50 years. And from my hotel room, I could hear every reaction the fans down on the street were having to this game. Well, Peru won, and there was dancing in the streets of Lima that night. So sports are not just an American thing, it's a world thing. And you would think, with a phenomenon as large as that the Bible would help us in some way to think about this appropriately. Now, the Bible, admittedly, doesn't discuss sports directly. Paul does use, and the writer of Hebrews uses, sports analogies and metaphors that clearly suggest the Christians he was writing to had some familiarity with the sports of the first century Greco-Roman world. So sports were not a foreign concept to Christians living in the first century. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God." Now, in the context, Paul's talking about eating food sacrificed to idols and whether or not that was okay. But when he says, whatever you do, he flings wide open what it is we're supposed to do for the glory of God. And that is absolutely everything. Everything is to be done with God consciousness and a God-honoring posture. And that includes watching and participating in sports. So I'm going to talk about three things in this podcast on sports. I want to talk about how sports are a gift, how sports are a venue to enjoy excellence, and sports mirror the gospel. First, sports are a gift, and I look at that under the biblical theme of rest. Rest is a major theme in the Bible. We see the first instance of it on the seventh day when God rested from his work. Well, why did he rest? Was he physically exhausted? No way. Why does he rest? What does he do on his day of rest? Well, if you dig deeply into Genesis 1 and 2, it seems God is using the seventh day to enjoy what he created. When we think of rest, we often think sit there and do nothing. That maybe not isn't the best way to capture rest in the Bible. Rest in the Bible means spending time doing things that rejuvenate the physical body, taking time to enjoy what you or somebody else has created. We read in Mark's gospel that on a Sabbath day, Jesus was going through the grain fields and his disciples were walking along with him and they picked the heads of grain. And of course, the Pharisees kind of threw a fit over that. Why are they doing what's unlawful on the Sabbath? And Jesus answered, he said, "Have you never heard or never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat. And he gave some to his companions. And then Jesus said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And so Jesus is saying that one of the reasons the Sabbath day, the day of rest at all exists, is so that human beings can spend time doing those things that facilitate physical, emotional, and mental refreshment. Rest is using the created world to foster refreshment. And so sports certainly can play a role in that. Watching them, participating in them, that can be a great way to facilitate physical, mental, emotional refreshment to the body. It gives us a break from the day-to-day grind, and that's why God put rest in our lives. So you could say sports, one of the reasons for sports is that sports is a gift that helps to facilitate the rest that God himself says that we need. Second is joy. Joy. The Academy Award-winning movie Chariots of Fire documents the real-life experiences of the British track team competing in preliminary events in the run-up to the 8th Olympiad. And one of the main characters in the movie is Eric Liddell. Eric's true passion was missions. In fact, after his sprinting days were done, he went to the mission field in China. But in addition to being a gifted evangelist, Eric was a gifted sprinter. At one point in the movie, Eric makes this statement. He says, I believe God made me for a purpose, but he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure. Eric Liddell viewed his speed as a gift from God to be thoroughly enjoyed. He felt the pleasure of God as he participated in his sport. And so why did Eric find such joy in sports? Well, because he saw them and the abilities needed to play them well as a gift from the Lord. And so how do you play and watch sports to the glory of God? Well, rather than segregating God away from your sports, why not include him in them by thanking him for them, by acknowledging that the earth and everything contained in it, including sports, belongs to him and is from him? I mean, you can just think about the concept of a gift. I remember who it was, C.J. Mahaney or something like that, talks about the fact that, when you're a child and you receive a birthday present, your parents might have first taught you to open the card and thank the giver and then unwrap the gift. And they wanted you to understand that the gift doesn't reinforce selfishness. The gift draws attention to the giver. And the same is true with God. Each day we receive innumerable gifts from God, and each one of them points our attention to him. But how often do we go through our day just kind of tearing the wrapping paper off one gift after another, never pausing to read the card? And how often do I disregard God while enjoying his gifts? And so every day we receive gifts from God without thanking him. And when we do that, we're neglecting the giver rather than glorifying him. So when we receive sports as a gift through which we can be refreshed and rejuvenated and find enjoyment, how are we supposed to respond to that? We're supposed to respond to that the way we teach our children to respond to receiving gifts. They're a good gift from God. But let me just add this, they can quickly become too important to us. Right? This is often the way it goes, not just with sports, but just about anything. We turn a good gift from God into something too important to us. Money is a good gift from God, but when you obsess over it, worry about it, or just are bothered intensely by not having enough of it, what have we turned it into? Money becomes just too important. Same is true with sports. If sports are what you consistently think about when you wake up in the morning, or you get agitated when you miss a game or don't ever miss a game, and then sports has become too important to you. If sports dominates your conversation and your use of time, then they're just too important to you. So take inventory of your life. Are you able to miss watching or participating in a game without that ruining your day? If not, sports are just too important to you. So there's a good way, there's a moderate way to enjoy sports as a gift. God is the giver of it. Let's thank him for it, but let's also maintain some moderation as we enjoy them. Second, sports are a venue to enjoy excellence. We crave excellence. Sometimes we don't acknowledge that, but we crave excellence. We don't, and think about why. Why don't we particularly care for mediocrity? I was a high school athlete. And so I'm not trying to demean or depreciate high school athletes, but why do more people attend Green Bay Packer football games than our local high school football games? Well, I think it has to do with something. It has to do with excellence. Human beings are naturally drawn to excellence. We, as human beings, were created to demonstrate and enjoy excellence. In Genesis 1 and 2, God's creativity and excellence are put on display, and his work in creating is described twice as his work. Creation is his work. In the Old Testament Hebrew has two different words for the word labor or work. The second word emphasizes labor that is raw and unskilled. The first, and the one used in Genesis 1 and 2, used to describe God's work, is used in other places to talk about skilled labor, work that is performed by a craftsman or an artisan. God's creation is excellent. The Bible tells us that we are created in the image and likeness of this God whose work is excellent. We are hardwired by God to create and enjoy excellence. That's why when you order your burger and the waiter sets it in front of you, you're not thinking to yourself, I can't wait to bite into this mediocre burger. No, when that thing is set in front of you, you are hoping this is everything you want it to be. When a hockey player puts on an incredible move to fake out the goalie, we find joy in that. Why? Because it's excellent. We could fill an entire hour with highlights from Michael Jordan's career. How many times did he make a move or a shot that caused us to say, wow? You know, when Joe Montana lobbed that ball into the back of the end zone and Dwight Clark came down with it, wasn't that a thing of beauty? Or when Aaron Rodgers hurled that Hail Mary against the Detroit Lions and it was caught for a touch. I mean, you can go on and on and on and on. So how do we watch sports to the glory of God? We not only need to thank him for the good gift of sports and the rest and joy they bring, we need to acknowledge that God is the originator of all excellence. Every excellent team, every excellent performance, every excellent play point to the originator of all excellence, the God of the Bible. Where do you think those athletes got their skills to begin with? God gave it to them. Eric Liddell knew that. You know, when my siblings and I were young and we wanted to give dad or mom a present, but we had no money, how did we do that? Mommy, I want to get dad a Father's Day gift. So mommy would take us shopping to buy something for dad and we'd give it to him. In reality, he wasn't getting anything he didn't already have because the money used to purchase that gift came from him to begin with. So where does Micah Parsons' skill and athleticism come from? God. So while it's tempting to marvel at the athlete, it's far better to marvel at the God who has given to Parsons every ounce of skill he has. God is the originator of all excellence. So when you watch sports with that in mind, you watch sports to the glory of God. And third, sports mirror the gospel. Now, I realize that not everybody listening to this likes sports. Some people are more music and arts type people. Some people are more work with your hands type people. Some people are bookworms. Even if you don't like sports, you have lots in common with those who do. In college, I was a bit of an odd duck. I was a music major and spent lots of time hanging around artists, musicians. There were very few, actually, in that department who enjoyed playing, watching, or talking about sports. I, on the other hand, grew up loving sports. I played sports. And so in college, as a music major and an avid sports fan, I found myself spending lots of time hanging out with other music majors, very few of whom like sports at all. But the more time I spent getting to know these musicians who couldn't tell you who won last year's Super Bowl, the more I began to realize how much we have in common. Because the thing that draws them to music is the same thing that drew others and me to sports. And you know what that is? Story, drama. If you listen carefully to a well-written piece of music, it tells a story. All throughout, it creates a plot, a storyline. There are moments of tension, suspense, and resolution. There's harmony and dissonance. And as I was immersed in the music and arts culture for 4 years in college, I began to see this is what was so intoxicating to these musicians. Well, the same thing happens in sports. When your favorite football team takes the field, as a sports fan, you have a sense of anticipation, excitement, maybe some nerves because you don't know how the story is going to go. You don't know how the game's going to go. You don't know how the story's going to go. Will your key players bring their A game? Will they execute? On the first drive of the game, your team marches down the field and scores. You breathe a sigh of relief. This is the way you had imagined the story beginning. But in the middle of the second quarter, the story begins to go in a different direction, a direction you wish it wouldn't. A couple 3-and-outs, a turnover. You put the other team back in the game. This irritates you. The bad guys are gaining ground in this story. And deep down, you're thinking, this is unjust. What is this world coming to? That bad guys would finish first. Well, this is what unites sports fans with sports non-fans. We all love drama, mystery, story. Fast forward to the fourth quarter. Your team is down 5 with 2 minutes to play, no timeouts, ball on their own 35-yard line. In football and in this situation, it's all about the quarterback. Can he execute? Will he make the throws? Can he move the ball down the field? Will the hero of the story come through? Will justice prevail? As you're watching, your heart is racing, the adrenaline is pumping on the edge of your seat. More likely you're standing up. How is this thing going to end? And you watch as play after play, your quarterback moves his team down the field, one completion after another, until with just 10 seconds to play, he scrambles out of the pocket and lobs one to the back corner of the end zone. The wide receiver elevates above the defenders and brings the ball down with 2 feet in bounds. Your team wins. Well, what was that? See, found all throughout life is story. A plot is established. There's a sense of anticipation. Good stories create tension, dissonance, mystery, moments where the story is not going the way you want it to. There are times when the story doesn't end the way you'd like it to. There are times when it does, and it brings great joy and satisfaction to you. There are heroes whom you cheer. Where does all this come from? Where does this interest in story and drama come from? And I would say God put it there because it is ultimately a story he is writing and one that you're a part of. Sports, novels, movies, plays, books, they all reflect a greater story, the story of redemption. It begins with God, this infinite, all-powerful being. What will he do? How complicated will the plot be? Will there be any twists and turns? The story begins magisterially. He creates planets and solar systems and galaxies and a universe. He creates plant and animal life. He then reaches down into the dirt on planet Earth and creates human beings who come to really closely reflect himself. They can speak and reason and love and serve. And all of creation is perfect. There's nothing broken about it. No death, no illness, no broken relationships, no stress. That story begins wonderfully. You could not script a better beginning. Your team is winning. They're playing flawlessly and executing to perfection. But then the opposing team begins to swing momentum back in their direction. The bad guys start gaining ground in this story. Creation is broken when human beings conclude they can find ultimate satisfaction in something other than God. This rebellion introduces brokenness into the creation. Now there's illness, conflict, hurt, pain, death. The opposing team seems to be ahead. They've scored a couple times and now your team is losing. What's going to happen? Well, this story goes back and forth. There are moments of great triumph where star players come to shine. There are moments of great setbacks where the opposition seems to have their way with the world. How's this going to end? Well, there is a hero to this story, but he's not the typical hero. Most heroes are flashy, skilled. Their victories are also flashy and skilled. The hero of this story of redemption was born in a barn and his bed was a feeding trough. His victory wasn't won through unbelievable displays of skill. In fact, his victory wasn't apparent to everybody. Most thought he had lost because he was nailed to a cross and executed. There wasn't a lot of pomp surrounding the hero of this story, nor the victory he won, because he did it through means we don't typically associate with victory. Now, we as the spectators and participants in this story have a choice to make. Did Jesus win? Will he ultimately triumph? We look at our world in our own lives, we see and we experience defeat at times. There are moments when the bad guys seem to have the edge. Conventional wisdom seems to indicate maybe we aren't going to win. How's this story going to end? Is Jesus really the superstar? Is he the hero? Will he win? Do you trust him? Do you have faith in him? Is he your only hope for future victory? So do you see, every game points to this story of redemption. Every superstar points to a greater superstar. So the next time you're enjoying watching a game, let it point you to the greater game. When your team wins and you feel the joy of it, let that point you to the greater win and the ultimate win that awaits those who belong to Jesus. When your favorite player becomes the hero of the game and admiration for that hero swells within you, let that point you to the greater hero and even greater admiration for him. For those who admire Jesus Christ above everybody and everything else, victory is certain. See, every sporting event points to the greater story of redemption. Every victory points to the greater victory. Every star player points to the greatest star player. Let the joy you experience in winning point you to the greater joy found in the greater victory Jesus has won through his death and defeat of it. This is one of the things I love about sports. When you watch them through spiritual goggles, you see how a football game points to something much bigger, better, more important, more satisfying, more invigorating. It points to Jesus Christ, the star player, victorious, and giving that experience of victory to all those who belong to him. So go enjoy your sports. Sports to the glory of God. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.